Report, this being Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel today to push for the finalization of a Gaza ceasefire deal. This after President Biden said he was optimistic a proposal put forth during last week's talks will close the remaining gaps between Israel and Hamas. Those talks are expected to resume in Cairo later this week. Blinken will be meeting with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday to try to seal a deal and also head off a potential regional conflict with Iran. Before we bring in our good friend, Admiral James Stavridis, just want to let all of you know that Kamala Harris has gotten off the plane, as have Governor Walz, and they have presumably gone right there into the beast that would be there, right into their car. You see it there at the base of the steps, so they will not be addressing those that have gathered in the hangar. That was not on the agenda, to be honest, but you never know. They go off the cuff. And we do know this being a bus tour, they will have some flexibility to stop at places, it had been suggested before, retail places and the like, on their way to Rochester. Now we bring in the Admiral James Stavridis. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you allowing us the time there to talk about the Democratic presidential nominee on this bus tour. Let's get into what's happening, though, overseas, because as you know, there are mixed messages coming out of last week's summit. You have President Biden and fellow mediators who say they are cautiously optimistic. We've been told this several times before, that negotiators were close to a deal, only to have it fall apart at the last minute. And then, contrary to what mediators are saying, Hamas is not at the talks and has described progress on a deal as an illusion. Do you expect a ceasefire deal will be reached by both sides this week?
Yeah, I can answer that in 3 words, Alex. I don't know. And neither does anybody else, including Tony Blinken, who ought to get the ultimate frequent flyer miles for the effort he has put into this alongside National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Everyone is pushing this so hard right now. If you pinned me down, I'd say there's a slightly better than even chance that we might see a deal over the next week or two. 3 things tell me that. 1, Iran has thus far not responded to the assassination in Tehran of one of the leaders of Hamas. Number 2, Hezbollah likewise has not responded over the last couple of weeks since one of their leaders was killed up in Beirut. So you've got what looks like some restraint on that side. And my 3rd reason for thinking we're probably better than even is just how much the U.S. wants this deal right now. Not just for the humanitarian reason, that's critical. Not just to get hostages home, that's vital. But they want this deal because it avoids, as you said in your read, the potential for this thing to expand into a wider war right in the middle of the presidential campaign. So there's a lot of powerful forces moving toward a deal.
Okay. Admiral, stand by just a moment. Very exuberant crowd there. Let me thank you, Admiral Stavridis, for staying with us. I know your time is precious. I'm going to ask you just a quick couple more questions. You know the way live TV is, and you've done this and you're a total pro, so thank you. Here we go. With regard to Iran and the way it wants to show strength, but not necessarily risk starting a region-wide war, what options does it have to do that?
They will use their proxies, and they're already doing that. So what I mean by proxies are Hezbollah to the north with missiles, Hamas, of course, already engaged in a brutal fight in Gaza. But don't forget, Alex, they have control of the Houthi rebels down in Yemen on the Red Sea. They've shut down half of the shipping going through the Suez Canal, where you're showing. And then finally, we tend to forget about this 4th group, but there are Iranian proxy groups operating in Syria and Iraq that can attack American forces. So that, I think, is where the eventual Iranian reply will come. But as we were saying before, that nice coverage of the vice president, by the way, that is a very enthusiastic looking crowd to my eye. my parents lived in Western Pennsylvania for a number of years. That's a fired up crowd. Good to see for the VP. And so I think the Iranians probably don't want a wider war at this point. They'll use their proxies. That's why I think there's, let's hope, a better than even chance of a ceasefire in the next week or so.
Okay. Need to get one question in for you about Ukraine, because Kyiv's surprise push into Russia, Kursk region there, it has shocked Moscow. It's exposed that country's vulnerabilities. It is the largest attack on Russia since World War II. How might this give Ukraine the upper hand in the war? And would it, sir, complicate efforts if Ukraine starts using U.S. weapons in Russian territory?
Alex, they're already using some of our weapon systems, armored personnel carriers, ammunition, HIMARS rockets. The key is going to be whether the U.S. would allow the Ukrainians to use F-16 fighters and the ATACMS long-range missiles. I think that's a real possibility at this point. Look, what the Ukrainians have done is shake the confidence of the Russian people. They have boosted morale of their own people, and they've sent a very strong signal to the U.S. and the Europeans and the other democracies that give us the tools, we can do the job. And they are showing the ability to conduct real combined arms military operations. Fancy term, all it means is putting together air, missiles, troops on the ground, special forces, cyber, getting all those elements to work. I got to think in the Kremlin, there's real concern about what's happening here. We'll see what the Russian response is. It'll be a busy week of geopolitics ahead.
For sure. To be continued, certainly, which guarantees we'll see a lot more of you, sir. Thank you again for your extended time.